Welcome back. We're here again with Father Edward Connolly, parish priest in the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Welcome back, Father.
Thank you, Mr. Buono.
Today we're talking about the economics of love. In other words, finances, money. Father, are finances affecting marriages? Is money breaking up marriages or causing problems that will affect marriage permanently?
In answer to your question, is the Pope Catholic? Does grass green? Do fish swim? Is water wet? Oh yes, I think, from what I've read, I could be wrong, I think that perhaps economics, financial matters are the number one cause of marital discord. Have you ever heard that? Or
Wow, the number one cause. I have heard it's the number one. I don't believe it. I have to believe that it's infidelity. But there are expertise that say that. I mean, they're kind of jump around. There's kind of a top three, I think. But definitely, many say finances is the number one cause of divorce. But should it be? Should finances be the number one cause of divorce? Should it be a cause at all?
Well, you mentioned infidelity, and I don't know which would rank higher on the list of causes for divorce, infidelity or finances. But I would say finances would probably come before infidelity or financial problems or financial discord.
Yeah.
It would be very rare that there would be, I think it would be very rare that there would be infidelity in the first year or two or even three of marriage. Infidelity more likely to, happen later on, I would think. But I would think that economic discord, financial matters, would sow the seed for later on infidelity, because when there's infidelity, then there's, rejection of persons,
Yeah.
And why would a husband reject his wife or vice versa? Maybe because of the hurt, and the depression that comes from financial matters. Every man wants to be a good provider. He wants to think that his income is going to be sufficient so that his wife and children and he will have sufficient, and even more than sufficient. And if he finds out that his income is not, then she's going to say, well, then I need to go out to work. Which is saying to him, well, you're just not able to do what I thought you should do, Men sometimes equate their capacity for satisfying their wives financially with their capacity for satisfying their wives in other ways. It's all very much connected.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree that men measure themselves in their worth by their ability to provide, their ability to secure and protect. All this is tied into what is commonly known as making a living, right?
Sure.
So that can support your family.
Yeah.
Gosh, if they can't do that, then they just fall apart. And if they have a wife who is not, a supporter, emotional supporter of the man, especially when he's down on his luck, he will fall apart. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. Too many couples, I think, want to start out where their own parents are after 25 or 30 or 40 years of marriage. They don't want to have a lesser standard of living than that from which they came. And that's unrealistic. It puts awful demands on them. A woman who puts such demands on her husband is not being very fair to him.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it true, though, that most young people, I mean, if you want to talk about marrying younger, say in your 20s, I mean, most start out with lower incomes. I mean, should young people, I mean, let alone older people, maybe older people, those who are 30 and above are thinking of getting married, maybe they have more in place, but should people put off marriage because there's not a satisfactory income stream?
The whole business of putting off marriage, we presume that they are not not unattractive to one another. You know, they're sexually drawn toward one another, and so if they put off marriage, then of course it's a great test of their virtue, it's a test of their chastity. Okay,
Right.
and we don't encourage that.
Right.
In the book of Hosea, in the Bible, there's a passage where God, who is the husband of Israel, says to his wife Israel. You know that analogy, God is the husband, the Israel in the Old Testament is the wife, or as we put it in Christian terminology, Christ is the husband, the church is the wife. God says to his previously unfaithful wife Israel, I will take you back to the desert, and there I will woo you, you know, and you will fall in love with me and I with you all over again. And the whole idea is that in the desert, there wasn't much. The wife didn't have much, okay? They didn't have much. And so there's a certain, the more we depend on material things for our happiness, the less we depend on persons, okay?
Yes.
And so a husband should find his primary happiness in his wife and she in him. And if that requires the sacrifice of a few material things, so be it.
Yeah. I think some of this stems from there being the pressure of a two-income society. You know, kind of the standard of living now is custom made now for the two-income family. In other words, it looks like just to have even the basics today, it's based on an income that typically two are bringing in. So the household could be making a lot of money, but it's because the two are working. And now you have the more religious persons, you know, Catholics for sure, who really want to have that one income family, and society is just not supportive of the one income family. So there's a lot of requirement made on the newly married couple or those approaching marriage to accept, if they're going to be a one income family, especially when children come along, to not, I guess they'll have to accept not having the acceptable standard of living that society is deeming normal.
Well, society is deeming it's always a matter, isn't it, of what other people are saying, what other people say, what other people are saying. What is needed in a newly married couple is a certain sense of independence, like, you know, well, we know what other people are thinking, at least we presume we know that they're thinking, but, you know, quite frankly, we don't care, you know. We will live according to this standard of living, which to us is reasonable. Living life reasonably, there's a lot to be said for living life reasonably, you know. In fact, Pope Benedict emphasizes the importance of reason in human life, okay? Before God ever gave us a church or a Bible or revealed religion in general, he gave us fundamental intelligence, and so we should be able to figure out a lot of things, you know, with his help on our own, by the reason, the power of reason that he has given to us. And one of the things that reason tells us is this, that's one of the laws of economics, but it's reasonable, that supply and demand affect one another. And so the more supply of prospective employees there is in a society, the less wages or salary, you know, capital has to pay.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
If there are 10 people competing for a job, the one who gets the job can be paid less than if only one person were competing for the job, or, you know, or applying for the job. So the more women, I'm talking now mostly married women, the more married women there are who insist on going into the labor force, then the greater the labor supply, and then the less wages the employers have to pay. Do you follow me?
Yes.
And so married women going into the labor force lower the wages of the men. Does that make any sense?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to be said at the economic level when it comes to that. I mean, it is the amount of bodies that are out there, whether they're male or female. So, Yeah, so implied in that is that there's argument for why, of many reasons why women should be at home running their households and tending to their children or what have you. I mean, there are other reasons people go to work, and we won't get into them. But fundamentally, this is an attitude. This is an attitude decision. Okay, we can have the attitude that what's a priority, what's reasonable, as you said, is that our vocation matters most, first and foremost, and therefore love is what matters most. The love in the sense of self-giving, spending your life in a gift of self to another. This has to supersede wonderment of how much we're going to live on, and it must imply a trust in God to provide.
Sure, absolutely. You know, making an analogy with my own life as a parish priest, is it possible that I could get myself a job on the side? What kind of a job? Well, almost any kind of a job. Maybe calling people on the telephone, you know, and selling things by the telephone, or do a little side work in the stock market or insurance, or a day a week as a plumber or something like that. Is it possible? The answer is, yeah, it's possible, but canon law forbids it. Okay, canon law forbids priests who are active parish priests to be involved in commercial enterprises. I'm not allowed to, you know, have a separate income that would involve my investment of time and energy away from the parish. Okay, you say why? Well, because the more time and energy I invest on non-parish matters, the less the parish.
Exactly.
Okay. They're just, you know, this is not the most brilliant statement, but there are only 24 hours a day.
That's right.
And 8 of those are usually occupied in sleeping, and maybe another 2 in just taking care of other personal needs. We have to go to the bathroom sometime, and you have to eat, that sort of thing. So it doesn't give a whole lot of time, you know, left over for our work. And what is the work of the mother? Well, to bear the children and to care for the children. Now somebody's going to say, oh, but her husband should help her. I didn't say the husband should not help her. Of course the husband should help her. But she is the primary caregiver to the house and the children. That's the fact.
And even when it doesn't seem like she's doing anything important, just the being around is the important thing, as we say.
Absolutely. Pardon me, as a priest, I keep thinking of analogies to my own life. I hope they're not unuseful or unhelpful. But a large part of being a priest, a parish priest, or any kind of a priest, is being there. Being there, you know. People expect the priest to be there. Be where? Be accessible, you know, be there. Because there's always something happening. Somebody's going to call about something.
Yeah. Well, let's turn now to our experts as they talk about this aspect of the economics of love.
Here's the difficulty, and society makes this very difficult. When I graduated from St. Joe's College in 1962, which was, you know, many moons ago, I didn't have any debt. Tuition was $800 a year for everything, and I could make $1,000 a year. I could make $1,000 a year working in the summertime. I was debt-free when I got out of college. That sounds unheard of. So what you have now is kids that get out of undergraduate school, and they have the equivalent of a mortgage payment.
You know, if you do financial seminars for married couples or for engaged couples, some will say, well, decide if you want to have separate checking accounts and those kinds of things. I'm not so sure that that is a good idea. I think this idea of, you know, mine and yours has to go out the window once you're married. The two become one flesh. And I mean, I think that means that you're all working for the same thing. That doesn't mean that, you know, you can't each have your spending money that you kind of get things with. That's fine. But this idea of really separating ourselves, and I always wonder, especially for women, why would you want your own account? Is it kind of something that you're putting there just in case this all doesn't work out? then I'll be set. And that's already kind of going in with this not fully committed, not giving yourself completely.
In our culture, you have these terrible, terrible things, these prenuptial agreements, which are very common today, unfortunately, and not simply among the super rich and the famous. And here are the conditions under which I will continue to be married to you. And if this marriage ends, here then is what you get and I get, and etc. This is dare I use the word, this is blasphemy. From a Catholic perspective, this is a blasphemy against the sacrament of marriage, which is a grace-filled adventure of trust.
You should start giving away money early if you're making a lot of money or a good amount, because for salvation we need the sacraments, we need prayer, and we also need to give alms. It's necessary, an obligation for people to give out of their abundance. So therefore, a person preparing for marriage should have that as, really said, one of the things that should be talked about in terms of finances beforehand. Because as you know, a lot of the data shows that an awful lot of the problems of divorce come from financial disagreements, which is an incredible thing, at least to our mind. But it is. Something went wrong, and people, I want this, you want this. And that life is not about economic accumulation or successes. It's about gift in every aspect.
People ask us all this time, ask us about this all the time with marriage prep. Why don't you do a section on finances? Debt is a terrible problem, and people coming into marriage with a debt is a terrible problem and leads to all kinds of discord. Well, obviously you know that already, so you should work on that. It's not our job, I think, to tell people how to work on their finances, how to manage their money. But I think it's important to say that how they manage their money, what they decide their priorities are in terms of material possessions or career. I want to make a lot of money, I have to move to this area or this city. These are all important decisions that the couple has to make together, and they really need to make sure that their values and priorities are lined up before they do that. Because once they're married, that domestic church that they form, everything that has to do with the running of that household is involved, whether it's the finances, the career, raising the children, deciding what kind of home to buy, what neighborhood to be in, and how you're going to live in that home, the prayer, the eating together, the having a family community, that's all caught up in it.
If you love the person, this is the person for you, that's going to be, it's part of your marriage will be working off that debt together. And I know couples who have gotten a lot of debt, and they said, but we're not going to put off expressing our love for one another and the openness to life simply because we're in debt. And of course, as I always point out to people, when you're in debt, there's always people who are very interested in your welfare, mainly the people you owe money to, including the government. So, that's not the reason to be in debt. But that's, to my mind, that's a very poor excuse, because it means already they're calculating.
What a couple needs to know is who they are created to be as persons made in God's image and likeness, made for love, made for communion, has everything to do with how they balance their checkbooks. Even the balancing of the checkbook, even the taking out the garbage, even the doing the laundry is done for love, or should be, and it's all to the glory of God.
Very important point in there. Father Neuhaus mentions that prenuptial agreements. He mentions of the, he actually calls it a blasphemy. What do you think about that?
Well, I can cite something. I think I have it right here in my folder. I brought this with me. What I have here, if I can find it, here it is the prenuptial inquiry from my diocese, the Diocese of Allentown. However, they would be fundamentally the same in every diocese. So the priest interviews the couple and fills this out, and then he signs it, and they sign it, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the questions he asks it of the groom and also the bride separately. Have you made or do you intend to make a prenuptial agreement? Yes or no? And then if yes, the priest says, for what reason? You know, the priest has to write out a summary of what their reason is. And then there's a little note in italics. If yes, the priest should contact the chancery, that's the bishop's office, for further direction.
Wow.
So, at least in my diocese, and I presume in other dioceses, the priest must consult with the bishop or the bishop's representative before proceeding with a marriage where there is a prenuptial agreement. So that's how seriously we take it.
Yeah.
Now, is there any prenuptial agreement that we would say, well, that's okay, that's acceptable? Yes, I remember a couple whom I married who were older people and widower, okay, both with children of their own. And the agreement had to do with division of assets after the death of one of the parties, that, they would not be equally divided among their adult children, okay? Now we would say, that's reasonable, But as far as assets that they bring together into the marriage, a young marriage where they're going to be children, if they say they're having a prenuptial agreement, that's really saying if we get a divorce.
Right.
And you say, what? What did you say? What did you say? Did you say if you get a divorce, you mean you are already planning to have a divorce? Well, I don't know that we can do business here.
Yeah. So this is a sign of an impediment in a way too. But a lot of times this happens with older couples, doesn't it? Like someone who's maybe established more with their finances, and there's a connection there with wanting to salvage the financial part of it if something happens. But it is an anticipation of the possibility of something happening.
Well, the older couple you mentioned, obviously everybody's going to die, so a prenuptial agreement in anticipation of death is different from a prenuptial agreement in anticipation of divorce.
I think I'm talking about someone maybe 40 years old, never married. They've been looking, they've finally found someone, but in the meantime they've been pretty successful in their career, and they want a prenuptial agreement to protect the assets.
Yeah, that I would say, without knowing the details, would generically be unacceptable, because you did say 40 years old, about, never married.
Right.
I would say a prenuptial agreement could be tolerable if they enter into the marriage with children from a prior marriage from which they, separate, from the prior spouses have died.
Okay.
Then there are assets which they want to protect for their own children.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like motive plays the biggest role here in the prenuptial agreement.
Yeah, well, I would summarize it by saying this. Are you having this prenuptial agreement in anticipation of death or in anticipation of divorce? Okay. And if in anticipation of divorce, well, we would say, in all honesty, don't go away mad, but go away, we can't do business.
Yeah. Now, how about the aspect of considering money and finances when, let's say, you're married and you've had, I don't know, maybe you have no children, maybe you have one or two, whatever. In the decision making and the having of the children, how much of a role should this play? I remember Fulton Sheen saying one time that those who look closely at the economics of having children are mostly interested in spending, not saving, and a frugal life. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It sure does. Well, if you say, let me think, I could have 2 children and I could finance college education for the 2 of them, or I could have 4 children without any guarantee that I could send them through college, get them safely through high school would be about all I could guarantee. And so, this is being rather cut and dried about it. which is better, to have 4 children who are high school graduates or 2 children who are college graduates? Which would be better in the, the order of being, as they say? Well, I'm really setting something up here. What would your answer be, Mr. Buono?
I'm going to go with the 4 children.
4 children who got through high school, for sure. I mean, to say otherwise would really be to say that a human being is valuable to the extent that he has education, or she has education, or to the extent that they have earning capacity.
Yeah.
A human being is something more than a unit of, or a commodity, a unit of labor. Otherwise, we become Marxists. Human beings exist for the greater society. A human being is valuable in and of himself. I remember once a conversation I had with a college gal, and it was a successful conversation, at least as I recall it, where she made noises after the conversation that indicated to me that she got the point. She didn't agree with the Catholic Church's prohibition on artificial contraception, and her point was, that the children are, units of satisfaction to the parents. You know what I mean? And that you just need so many. Like 2 will do. 3 at the max. 3 at the max. And I introduced to her a loftier concept. I said, but human beings are good and valuable and beautiful in and of themselves. That when you have children, you're producing something that you're co-producing something that is immeasurable in value, that will last forever into eternity. When the Gibraltar has tumbled, and when the ocean has dried, and when the Sahara is underwater, those children will still be in existence.
Oh, that's so true. One time I did a marriage preparation for a young couple from both solid Catholics, who knew a lot about the faith, but for some reason they brought up they just made the statement. We're going to put off having children because, he wants to be an aspiring actor, they don't have much the financial situation to deal with the children now, and he wants to pursue that. And of course, I suggested that they don't get married, right, for now, because there's only one thing that you can do in marriage that you cannot do, right, outside of the marriage as you pursue these goals. But I did strongly suggest even more that you continue with your marriage and just be open to children, and God will provide. Well, about a year later, they came, I saw them, and they had their twins with them. And of course, they're immeasurably happy, reconfigured to the right direction in life. All those plans and even fantasies in a way went away because of the duty that it just comes because you are open to children. And God does provide. It's not a cliche. He does provide for those who are taking the leap of faith to co-create with Him.
Yeah. I would never speak in favor of anyone getting inebriated, but I did come across a couple once who had a child that they did not anticipate that they would conceive, and they were happy to have the child. Later, the woman confided to me that the 2 of them had gone to a high school reunion and had a bit too much to drink. She and her husband. And as a result, they had this 3rd child. I'm not really sure how that worked, but maybe you could explain it to me sometime. But I thought, well, about the best use of alcohol I ever heard of.
And who could top that one? On a last note, talking about planning, a lot of people try and plan in a lot of ways their whole life. They're like, we're going to get married, I'm going to do this, we're going to make that much money, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. What do you think about planning, especially financial? I mean, life deals you some interesting twists as you go along, do they not? And although it's nice to have a plan, you really need to be flexible, don't you, when it comes to what you're expecting, when it comes to your standard of living and what you want for your children?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's some sort of a virtus in medio stat. That's what they taught us. Virtus in medio stat, which means virtue or truth stands in the middle. Okay, so between the 2 extremes, just go with the flow, and then the other extreme of everything has to be planned, ahead of time. The truth is in the middle. Sure, there should be a plan, but it should be a plan with a sense of humor.
ready to be adjusted
Ready
along
to be
the way.
adjusted at all times. My sister, one of my married sisters, told me this. She, at the age of I think 42, give or take, I think 42, found that she was pregnant with number 7, and she told her dear husband, my dear brother-in-law, guess what, honey? She said he looked at her, smiled wanly, walked out the door, took a walk around the block, came back in and said, well, that's wonderful, that's wonderful.
I like that.
Yeah. Number 7 is I'm happy to say, one of my, I call her my favorite niece. Of course, they're all my favorite nieces and nephews, but she's a splendid young woman.
Yeah. Well, I have 7 as well, as you know, and I can assure you that every one that is announced, brings about a new source of yes, I'm excited, but boy, what's coming next? But one thing that's for certain is God provides. I mean, everything that we have and that has happened to provide for them is just a total provision by God, with us just keep moving in the process. So,
the patron saint of the diocese to which I belong is St. Catherine of Siena. In fact, our cathedral was named after her. And she was, I think I'm correct in saying, she was the youngest of 23 children, and people just go, what? 23? She was the youngest of 23. And she turned out to be the first woman ever declared a doctor of the church, And I say, my goodness, what if her parents had decided to stop at 22,
No one would have faulted them.
Right.
But we wouldn't have her. You're right.
There we are.
So be open. That is our...
Be open.
Be open. The finances are not so important, and if there is unrest in the marriage about finances, they can be worked out because of getting on the same page about what's important.
Exactly.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Father. Go to our website, www.roadtocana.com, for more resources and these programs. Share them with others who are in need of learning about these things, preparing for marriage. And remember, while you're on this road, to trust in God's plan for you and keep Christ's peace with you always.
On the road.